Before we get going into your Hockey IQ podcast episode, I want to thank our sponsor, Rapid Shot. Rapid Shot is the smart shooting lane. It's like a batting cage for hockey players. Very cool. Tracks your shot in 3 ways: accuracy, shot speed, and reaction time. Easy to use. Actually, I used it when I played and was growing up. Very easy. Simply scan your phone in, select your settings, and start shooting. You can see your stats on the app and online. You can check them out at rapidshot.com. Great small business. I actually grew up with one of the owner's sons and have played with all the family members by now, just in local pickups here in Ohio. Very cool local business. Awesome product. I love it. I know quite a few NHLers have them in their homes. A lot of D1 programs have it at their rinks. So you have to check this out. Rapidshot.com. Check it out. Rapid Shot, thank you so much for sponsoring our podcast. On the Hockey IQ podcast today, we bring on Ed Zdolshek, legendary goalie in the Cleveland area. Absolutely fantastic guy overall. Eddie, thanks for coming on the show. It's always great to have a Nazareth grad.
Appreciate the invitation. Didn't know if I'd make it this far, but good to be here. Happy to chat hockey with you.
Yeah, first question I have for you, I want to dive into this because you and I played a little bit together, but even more fascinating is you're part of, I want to say, the first class at Nazareth College, and were able to take the reins as a starting goalie. Curious on your thought process and the recruiting process to go to a program that hadn't been established when you really started going down that track.
So it's interesting as a goalie. And I mean, really, when you're looking at your, secondary education in general, you got to see what fits in all that. But as a goalie, I knew I wanted to play and I wanted to be in the net. So there's a handful of schools, maybe, lower Division I or, even some of the better Division III teams where they were pretty much saying, yeah, you can come to school, but no guaranteed you're going to play. And with Nazareth, Coach George Roll and Coach Jared DeMichael, who's, actually at UMass now, they pretty much left the door open, said, hey, if you show up, you're going to get a lot of games. You're going to, get the opportunity to play and make an impact on the program. And I mean, you just know from, our experience playing together and, even now I'm, a gamer and wanted that opportunity and want a chance to, get in the net all 4 years. And, couldn't be happier with my decision. And, it was an awesome experience.
Gamer. That is the absolute perfect word to describe your game. Absolute gamer. You had the old Dominik Hasek mask, which was always fun. What's the story behind that?
Yeah, that probably, I don't know if that necessarily helped my college recruiting when, I'm out there playing junior hockey in the Dominik Hasek mask. So you probably don't see those too often. But I was, I'm not really a big guy as is, generously listed as 6 foot on the college rosters, probably more in that 5'10", 5'11" range. But as a little kid, just the goalie helmets were always, really big and awkward for me. And, the most important part being a goalie is seeing the puck. So the goalie helmet always bounced around on my head, and I just had that player's helmet, all through youth hockey. And, I tried to make the switch to the actual goalie helmet, later as I got bigger, and it just, it just felt awkward and couldn't, look properly. And then finally I got connected with Gary Warwick and, Warwick mask, and able to get the actual Dominik Hasek, pro replica that, wore all through college and pro. So pretty unusual to see it as a goalie, but definitely got a lot of chirps as well as some compliments from teammates and opponents.
So it was important for you to look around. So is that something that you felt was extremely important for your game? How did you develop that? I mean, playing together, I would say that no offense to any other goalies like Richard Zucker, but Ed Zdolshek was an absolute stud back there and won us a few games, or at least kept us in a few games. And I mean, one, had to be a little frustrating how many shots you faced, but number two, just the development of how many shots, how you read the game was quite amazing. So I'm curious to hear about your thought process behind all of this.
Yeah, so like I said, seeing the puck and being able to focus and track and watch that thing is, probably, as important to be the most important thing about being a goalie, along with, I think skating. We can kind of touch on that later, but being able to look around and, if you look at NHL goalies, their heads are always, they're looking at the puck, they're looking at then the slot, they're looking at other danger areas. So, not that I really, knew that that's what they were doing at the time, but I sort of always, tried to, see where all five guys are at on the ice. And I think, one of my, greater strengths was, maybe I wasn't the most technically sound goalie, with those head-on shots or, looked apart on, just making the typical save, but thought I had a knack of maybe making that backdoor save or, seeing a guy and getting to a puck that normally you might not get to. And, just what I tell, my goalies nowadays, it's important to, see where all five players are on the ice, and especially important to see those players that you may not necessarily be focusing on that are either in front of the net or backdoor. So, whether, the helmet was, a huge factor in that or, kind of a combination, I don't know, but, I think it definitely played an important role for me, being able to make those type of saves and to focus on all five guys on the ice.
There's a gentleman down here who works for the Blue Jackets, formerly USA Hockey, Dave Caruso. You probably know the name at least. If you don't know him,
we've worked together a few times.
Yep. And he always talks about he wants jungle cats. So goalies that are put in situations where they have to look around and read the game and not just get fed easy pucks. So with developing goalies, what's your philosophy? I mean, you're a head coach at some levels, you're a goalie coach, you're assistant coach at others. So you've got this holistic view, but I'm curious on your position that you played growing up and really have a love for goalies. How do you go about developing those players to the fullest potential?
So for me, the two biggest areas that, I look at that are important in stopping the puck, that first one, being able to find and track the puck. If you can't read a release off of a player's stick or, you have trouble tracking the puck side to side, it's going to be very, very hard to be a goalie. Sometimes I think you can kind of, teach that and you can continue to get better at that. But I think there is some part of it that you just got to be able to understand the game and know that release and know, how a player shoots and just, kind of everything behind that. So reading and reacting that shot in the puck is super important for me and when evaluating goalies. And then the other thing that I think is maybe the most important part, and I even tell my kids, I want my goalies to be the best skaters on the ice, not just, the best goalie skaters, but I want them to have the best edge work. I want them to be able to skate in all different types of scenarios. So even in a lot of drills I do, we're not doing just strictly crease skating. We'll do a lot of that, but, I'll take them kind of, goal line to red line, doing, skating on one leg, working on different edges, putting them almost in uncomfortable spots, so that they can just kind of keep on growing and adapting with their skating, just because you're going to be put in a ton of different situations, how you stay balanced, how you move, super important to getting square to that puck.
So do you have any favorite goalies in the NHL that you love to watch or share clips with your kids on?
It's tough. I ask mostly all my kids, especially, when I'm doing, youth and minor hockey stuff, who their favorite goalie is. Cause most of the time, there isn't a bad goalie in the NHL to look at their skating. So usually, I mean, my question is, oh, what's your favorite goalie? And yep, you should definitely take a look at his skating. It's elite, but I'm sure you can appreciate this guy just because, smaller goaltender and, probably one of the best goalies in the NHL is Juuse Saros. Again, not a big goalie. I know we've talked about him before, but the way that he's able to move and, track the puck and get to his spots, he doesn't have to be the 6'3", 6'5" goalie that, seems to be the norm or the the specimens like Valesky and, others, but Saros just can get to his spot. And I really, I admire that about him, and I admire his aggressive play. Just it's fun to watch. And again, a good teaching point for these kids that, hey, this guy is as average and, his physical traits as any guy, and he's playing at the highest level. So, kind of gives them something to shoot for.
It's amazing how many pucks hit him in the chest, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, hit it in the chest, good stuff." But it's like, well, he actually got there to begin with. Like, he moved on his feet, he's got explosive skating, like cut down the angle, like unbelievable player. Could not pick a better player, I think. But that, I'm biased. He's my favorite.
I knew you'd like him.
Yeah, you know me too well. The other big key with goaltending, though, and I'm pretty sure that, maybe like 1, 2, 3 goalies each year, like in their own class, but like goalies 40 through 64 are probably around the same skill level. What probably separates them is the mental game, the mindset, the mental toughness, the mental strength, whatever you want to call it. From your perspective, you were definitely an outgoing personality, we'll say, and loud on the ice. So it was like, were you charging yourself up? Like, how did you approach it? And then how do you see other goalies that you're teaching now approaching that? And what are maybe some specifics that you're seeing out there that are really helpful for this?
That's funny you say that. I know, and now it's got me thinking that there's definitely a few different types of personalities, out there as a goalie wise. And, whether, I think I was more of just try to, fit in with the team. I was, loud, giving directions on the ice, a little bit of an eccentric guy. Then I think sometimes you have the goalies that are just ultra focused. They don't say a word. They're just in the zone. Then you kind of have the goalies that are a little wacky, and they're like, oh, that's the goalie, and they kind of have that stereotype. So I think there's definitely a few different, avenues you can go on, but whatever, you can do with, that gets you in that mind frame that you're dominant and focused. That I think that's super important. Another aspect that I think, kind of depends on your personality and how you would do it is, hitting in baseball, like it's kind of built on some failure. Like, as a goalie, like no one ever in the history of goaltending has ever not let in a puck. So, we all strive to have that 1,000 save percentage and to, never let in a goal, and hate letting in goals. But, when you do let in a goal or make a mistake, which, you're more than likely going to at least make a mistake during a game, maybe that, costs a goal or not, it's how you respond to that. Some goalies, if you, let mistakes really eat you up and then it causes you to lose focus, that's not going to benefit your performance. But if you're able to, quickly realize you make a mistake, try to correct whatever caused that mistake, and then move on from it, I think that's what kind of separates some goalies from having, an okay mind frame to having an elite mind frame in the nets.
So that last piece I thought was super critical, where we're talking about having that self-reflection, but then also having the ability to move on. Because I feel like a lot of younger players, and even some older ones, can really struggle with getting out of their own head in that self-assessment and, how terrible am I? Like this negative self-talk. I'm curious, was it ever a struggle for you to get out of your own head? Have you seen kids that really struggle with that? Because you obviously need to have that self-reflective piece to grow, but that last piece is unbelievably critical, is the ability to move on, be fresh, be clear, and have that focus so you can perform the best.
So that's actually two good points there. And so I'll kind of touch on one first. So the first thing is self-reflectiveness, and then kind of the mindset of, where you want to be, and, positive attitude. So starting with the self-reflective, I think that's super important, to have the ability as a goalie to kind of look within yourself, look how you maybe handle a situation, on the ice, a play or anything like that, but then also look how you handle it emotionally. Um, it's different for a goalie for a number of reasons. Up until recently, I didn't really have like a goalie coach, at my practices often. I didn't even really have a goalie coach in general, probably until I got to juniors in college. So like, there wasn't really, hands-on coaching, and I know even to this day, a lot of goalies don't have that, coach, hey, you need to do this, you need to do this, kind of pushing you. So you have to be, kind of self-reflect on, hey, how am I doing technically? How am I doing, with these shots? Is there something I can do, differently? And then also kind of like the mental side of the game and really understanding it. Whether you're a forward, you can talk to your line mates, or a defenseman, you can talk to your D pair. Sometimes goalie could talk to their backup partner at the time, but for the 20 minutes or 15 minutes, however long the period is, you're in that net yourself. So you can't, go to your goalie partner at that time and ask them questions and, kind of bounce things off them. So I think it's important to kind of have that, almost reflecting in the net. Okay, hey, things are getting hairy in this game situation. Maybe the balance is tilting for the other team. I need to take some whistles, slow things down. Maybe you're struggling and you're just trying to get yourself back on path, or maybe you're just in the zone and you're dialed in and it's just like, okay, keep this going, kind of positive self-talk with that. So, that's sort of an important area. And then I guess jump into, your attitude and, making it always be positive. I think that's super important. And, it's going to sound crazy, but the attitude that I had was anytime I stepped on the ice, I wanted to be a better goalie than the goalie across from me. A lot of the times, maybe the player was my age and, it was true. I know a handful of times I was, opposing ends from, maybe I was in high school and the goalie was a junior goalie. I know a few times maybe I was playing juniors and on the other end was a pro goalie. And, maybe, pound for pound, that wasn't the case, that goalie across from me was, better than me, but I had the mindset that I was going to outplay him, that, however long we shared the ice together. So I think being super confident in your abilities, but also kind of being realistic in a sense that, hey, you're going to, make some mistakes and, let some pucks by you. But I think that all kind of is part of balancing that, delicate act of being a goalie.
It's not easy. It's a mental game, that's for sure. But you were definitely stoic back there and approached it in a very fun, loving way that we all love playing for you. So going back to maybe the technical a little bit, maybe give us a little bit on some of your tricks of the trade per se. Like, how do you read a puck off a blade? Or are you reading body language of the shooters or their tendencies? What was that like?
So I guess some tricks of the trade, things that, really, I focused on, and then I guess I'll say kind of try to relate to it to teaching aspect. Because that's the one thing I know that, being a coach and as well that, it's really tough to make a clone of yourself out there. Like no one's ever going to see it or do things exactly how you would. It's kind of adapting how the kids now, the goalies or players, can take what you're saying and then use it on their own. So for me, the big thing that I always come down to is my initial positioning. So I try to make sure, my kids that, all right, they're square to that puck, but they're also in some sort of like stance or athletic position where they can then make a reaction type play, whether it's a reaction to the shot or a reaction to that player moving the puck and passing. So that's, I think, one of the most important foundational pieces is getting a good initial stance. And then from that stance, being comfortable to do any type of movement, whether it's, like I said, moving side to side or butterfly or whatnot. And then Another key point that you just mentioned is reading the releases off of sticks. You kind of have the old saying, okay, yeah, the blade's straight ahead, he's deking, or the blade's open, he's looking for a shot. Like, you're looking at that things, but I also look at the player's handedness. I think that's almost as important as, hey, is that they in a shooting position or deking stick handling position. Whether a player is left-handed or right-handed and where he's at in the zone, that's going to dictate a lot of the options that player has for a play. I always try to focus my goalies on, okay, you're in a good position. You're recognizing what hand that player is. You're, again, going back to the point of looking around the ice. You're identifying where the other four guys are on the ice, what handed they are. And then it almost narrows down, the plays that are available to be made. So, you have a player that's kind of on the half wall and he's not in a great shooting position, kind of at an awkward angle. You can see out of the corner of your eye a player in the slot and he's, left-handed shot and that left blade's kind of towards your back post, okay, I understand here if that puck gets across, I got to make a decision to get to that far left post just because of that, player's handed shot. So, that I think is going to, kind of help the most in just recognizing, what types of plays are available. So, the better you can kind of grasp as, what handed player, is on the ice and in what position they are to make a play, that's going to kind of eliminate a lot of options, for what type of save you need to make.
So if you have a lefty coming down on you, what would be the hardest place for you to make a save on? If he's taking a shot from the slot, where would you be like, that's a really tough save for me to make?
Oh, if they're just like walking down middle of the ice, between the hash marks, like all alone, like I always, think kind of that same side of the, so their left-handed shot, it would be my blocker side as I catch right goalie. So it would be just above the pad, below the blocker, that 6-hole or whatever. And then if, you're a right-handed shot, just same thing on the other, just below the glove. I think it's pretty tough to, close that gap. And then with it being on like that same side, a player can just kind of snap it off in that direction. And, it's a favorable angle for them. So, a lot of the times I'm looking, okay, quick shot or rebound shot. That's my two main concerns or, when I'm evaluating as a coach. So, you really got to protect that 6-7 hole for those type of shots. And then, always looking for the rebound because, if they're coming from any type of off angle, the pass off the pad's probably the next best thing that they're going to look for.
All right. Well, we'll keep this quick because unless you're a goalie nerd, you really don't care. Your thoughts on RVH, VH overlap? What is your thoughts on those bad angles?
I think the VH and RVH, like those are great, provide solid seal, but for what I recommend, I'm going to go back to whatever the goalie feels comfortable. I've seen, kind of from my experience, I was a hybrid of, doing all the things and playing upstanding. I've seen goalies really, pretty much rely on RVH now. So it's whatever that goalie feels comfortable with, I would stick with that. But I also tell my kids, practice everything. Practice staying on your feet, practice the RVH, practice the VH, put yourself in many different positions. And then I guess the last thing I'll touch on this is I say, get a ton of reps and put yourself in all different types of positions. Because if you look at where a lot of the plays develop, in my opinion, players are developing either, players carry the puck in, taking it wide. So they're along the half wall, they chip it in, player, puck goes below the goal line. So a lot of the times you're going to be starting or players are going to be starting, with the goalie in that, post position. So you have to be comfortable in what you decide you want to do. So find something that you're comfortable and able to move out of, because that's where a lot of the plays, offensive zone are going to start.
Beautiful. Going back ever so slightly, you talked about reading off the blade. So you're saying if the puck is open, the blade is open or neutral, it's more likely going to be a shot. But if it's closed, it's going to be more a deke. Am I understanding that correctly? Or how do you read?
Like when a player, I say is kind of attacking me and that puck's out in front of their body and, they can kind of, bring it to the forehand or backhand, I got to read, okay, are they going to, again, kind of going back to just because I'm a left-handed player, like, left-handed shot. All right, if they're going to rip that on their forehand, I'm looking probably that low blocker. But if they're going to take it to their backhand, all right, they're probably going to try to go to my glove side. So, reading that blade and, which type of move they can make. Also, again, important to realize, is that defenseman blocking off one avenue for them or the other? Is that going to help me, hey, my defenseman's really taking away that, their forehand, is it only play the backhand? So, reading the blade and then, when it's open, ready for that shot, you can kind of, almost see where that player is shooting. If the blade is open and you can kind of, I don't know, it's hard to explain, I guess, but you can almost read, hey, are they looking high or are they looking low, just based on, openness and angle of the blade.
Yeah, I found that when I tried goaltending to be true as well. Like you could read almost the body language. If like they had like that open chest, it's like, okay, well, you can't really pull that and go low. If you did,
Right.
You whiffed. So good on you if you score on that
Exactly.
one.
Exactly. You're reading the blade and body position, and that gives a little bit of tell. And then I always tell shooters what makes shooters an elite goal scorer or an elite shooter is, they may not necessarily have the hardest shot. Like a lot of kids will always ask me, oh, who had the hardest shot you ever, shot against? And I'm like, a lot of guys could bring the heat, but there's only a handful of guys that, were able to, almost disguise their release, where I wasn't, they didn't have that tell of opening up and kind of exposing their body for, a shot to go upstairs. They just kind of put that pressure on their stick and it shot off. Important for shooters to keep in mind is you want to beat goalies and, full goalies, work on your release and disguising that release.
That brings us to our next spot. What are some things that players can do to make goalies' lives difficult? For me, I'm always like, when in doubt, I'm shooting in your feet or I'm shooting right over the pads. Like I like going high is the last option for me. And I feel like when I played goalie, understanding like how difficult, like the butterfly became a thing for a very good reason. Like that ice is very difficult to cover. And it's amazing how many players, I mean, McDavid scored one last night, literally on the ice in overtime, like the best player in the world. Well, maybe not best. I'll go with Austin Matthews on that, but like one of the two best players in the world is literally shooting on the ice consistently. Matthews does it consistently where they're finding these holes on the ice. I'm curious, from your perspective, what are items that they do to make your life difficult? One, maybe that's on a breakaway where they're holding the puck to their side. So now you're maybe thinking shot or deke rather than if it's in front where you're most likely going to be deke compared to where they locate that puck. Obviously, disguising a shot release is something absolutely gargantuan at the elite levels, but very few shooters have that ability to really disguise it or have the technical capabilities. But what are maybe some things that shooters do to really make your life miserable?
Probably the most important thing for a shooter is patience, I would say. Because a goalie, they're reading, the situation. They're the ones, reading and reacting. So, until that player kind of makes a decision, like the goalie is reacting off that player's decision. So the longer you can disguise your decision making or wait and maybe get the goalie to bite or make a first move, or you drop a shoulder and then that causes that goalie to freeze. Like if you can enable that goalie to react before you make a decision, that's going to open a lot of opportunities up. And I mean, again, going back to McDavid and last night and the goals that he scored, like that's what he's really great about is, I mean, he can move and he can do, whatever he wants with the puck. But I think a lot of the times like goalies are reacting because they think, oh, this guy's so fast, he can wire the puck, and he already can get them to make, a reaction type play where, he has an extra second then to make his decision and do the opposite of what the goalie's reaction is. So, I think that's important for any shooter is, having the patience and poise, with the puck to make a play and then trying to get that goalie to react first. Shooting wise, honestly, like there's getting the puck on net is never a bad idea. I always say like it's hard to make saves as a goalie. So a lot of the times I see players almost loading up and trying to get the perfect shot off so that, it goes, bar down and, the upper corners. Like you said, if there's nothing available and the only thing you can really do is kind of get that thing, through to the net low, like that is a great, pretty high quality chance. I do a lot of drills with goalies where I have them trying to just look down at pucks. When we're skating, I'll have pucks at their feet and they're kind of weaving in and out of pucks just because it's really hard to see pucks in our feet and kind of around that area as a goalie. So, if you're able to get a shot off, through traffic, it's already hard for that goalie to pick up. All right, say it does get to them, it gets to their feet. All right, maybe it has a chance to go in. And at the very least, there's probably going to be a rebound opportunity. And again, goalies maybe not picking up the puck, struggling to find it, rebounds out in front. He's going to be that much behind on making that, rebound reactionary save. So, those are, I guess, a couple key things I guess for shooters to focus on. But I mean, if you want to talk about getting scored on and, all that, I can go for hours about things that I've let by me. So, don't know how much time you got today.
Yeah. I don't think we got time for that. I think we better just move on at this point.
Right.
But yeah, the one last thing, rebound control. What does it mean to you? How do you become better at rebound control? Because, a lot of times pucks just hit you, but is there a way that you control where they go? What is it to you? How do you get better at it? Because it's obviously not a good thing when a goalie just is leaving for a goalie. Great for the opposition, obviously, if you're just leaving pucks right in front of the net.
So again, yeah, you want to score goals, get rebounds out there. Like that's how a lot of goals in the NHL go in, and then any goalie struggles making those second and third saves. But as far as for a goaltender controlling the rebound, one thing that I like to focus on is the goalie's hands. And I think it's super important to have active and strong hands. And I try to, bring this up with kids, and, I'm sure, you could probably attest to this as well, is that a lot of these youth hockey and minor hockey players, like the stick handling and the hands they have is, I mean, it's incredible. Like there's some players out there. And I try to tell goalies like, hey, yeah, like you see the forward stick handling and doing crazy things with the puck. Like we can have just as, sick hands, quote unquote, as they can. Granted, are we stick handling and doing things that they're doing? No, but our hands being active and controlling rebounds are just as important. And I mean, to be honest, just as silky. So for a goaltender and controlling rebounds, like when your hands are out in front of you and active, it prevents you from, I guess, kind of locking up inside and jamming, yourself. You're then able to, control the rebounds, use the blade and angle of your stick to, maybe get the pucks that are on, your, far left and far right pad, where if those hands are tight, you're not going to have that type of ability. So, I think it's also important with just catching and blocking pucks in front of your body. If you're, trying to trap it and, get that puck too close to your chest, you kind of tend to get handcuffed where, you see the best goalies catching pucks in front of their body, watching it into the glove. That's what, having active and strong hands are to me. And then, as a result, silky hands, as I like to call them for goalies.
Active hands. Okay. correct me if I'm wrong, I'll try to describe this to the listeners here, but basically active hands are where you're going to put the hands out in front of you. So rather than by side of your body, you're putting them out in front. One, you can kind of track pucks into that much better, but also you're able to cut down the angle ever so slightly. But it actually makes a massive difference for those goalie nerds out there. Go look up box control if you don't know it already.
Beautiful.
That's concept.
That was the magic word I was looking for was box control. You hit it on the head. Active hands enables you to, control the rebound and get the puck out in front of your, before it catches your body, and then takes away the angle with the box control.
Beautiful. So that's all the technical goaltending stuff. Next thing I want to talk about is lessons you've learned through your coaching journey so far. So obviously you haven't been here for 20 years, but I think that most coaches are still fumbling their way through the basics. I feel like I am half the time, and I feel like even veteran coaches, like I'm still fumbling through a lot of stuff. So I think it would be absolutely fascinating to walk through some of the lessons you've learned, things you're working through right now, to get a grasp on that. And feel free to ask me any questions, and maybe I know, maybe I don't know, but either way, it'll make for a good conversation here.
Yeah, this was a great question. I know we talked a little bit before jumping on air, just different things. Yeah, it's tough because going back to me as a player and kind of the personalities, like you want to be the perfectionist and you want to be the best coach right away and all that. But, as far as learning, like, the biggest thing that I think so far for me, and I kind of alluded beforehand, is like, taking the sense that, like, at first, maybe when I was doing this, like I tried to, have 20 clones of myself out there and, do everything that I would have done and, try to mold them into, my type of player where, I've kind of learned, especially over the last few years, that like you're not going to make the same player. You're not going to make, whether it's yourself, you're not going to make another McDavid or Matthews. You really gotta, take a look at what type of kid he or her is. What do they respond well to? What don't they respond to? What are their goals? Where are they trying to get, out of being coached? And I think that's gonna kind of help you reach their ceiling. I'm not sure if you have any, comments on that or anything, but that's sort of been my biggest lesson right now is, how can I, get the most out of these kids and get them to be the best player they can be, even if it's not, my ideal, hockey player.
I think we all start out that way of like, we know our style and it's very familiar and personalized to us. So we all try to create somewhat of clones or somewhat of a skill set. But like for me, like I'm a playmaker, so passing super important. I don't think that I'm ever not going to put functionality onto that. But at the same point, like, as a passer, I appreciate a good shooter. I need that in my life.
Right.
So I think you're spot on. Like, how do you understand the kid's personality and skill set? Because at the end of the day, it's got to become personalized to them, just like it was personalized to us. So how can you provide information that they can then reflect on and apply? That's always my thing. It's like, it's either creating permission or pressure. Like, do you want the pressure so it narrows their focus, or do you want to increase maybe some creativity, get more permission to try and experiment with things, and allowing this self-discovery process? I think that's the real key for me, is coming through that self-discovery process. So that's been massive. Are there some things within your coaching that you didn't expect you'd spend so much time on, or conversations that you're having quite often?
It's tough. I don't know. Like, it's been a little bit of a learning experience too, in the sense that, as a goalie, and I know I've talked to plenty of coaches about this before, is like, I've been by myself in the net majority of my life. Like, I've never really been on the bench. Occasionally if I, wasn't starting, I'd be on the bench and kind of see how that functions. So that's been a bit of a learning process for me, is kind of, not that I didn't know how to run lines or anything like that, but just kind of managing the bench and seeing the game from that perspective. So it's been a little bit of an interesting transition where I think I, have certainly some areas to grow. But again, that's kind of, you just got to roll with that experience and, take it as it comes.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it actually way earlier in the episode about like how players communicate. Like that's kind of the biggest thing that I found is the teams that are consistently talking before, after, during shifts are the most successful all the way through. And goalies is a lot of self-talk to yourself and
Mm-hmm.
managing yourself with players. Like you can't control others, but you can start to get in their head and start to meld and have to find that chemistry. So that for me, that's, I think, super important. And what I was able to learn very early on was that I don't care what you're talking about, as long as it's not, Dora the Explorer or something like that. Like you're
Right.
talking
Right.
somewhat hockey or getting to know your teammates. It's all a big benefit to everyone.
I totally agree there. And, I think sometimes where coaches can make the mistake is, like every coach, wants to coach and help players because, they want to help. They want to, input, some sort of positive impact for these kids. Where sometimes I think, when a player gets off the ice after a 30, 40-second shift and they're huffing and puffing and they, a lot of stuff's happening, like, they don't need two or three coaches, telling them, hey, you should have done this, should have done that. Like what may be most beneficial is if they, sit with their line mates and say, hey, I thought you were doing this. This is why I jumped into the zone here or something like that, where, having a coach, tell you something, yeah, they might get something out of it. But when you're kind of collaborating together, with your teammates, that's probably where you're going to see, the most growth. So that's a great point where, another area to focus on for coaches is, getting your guys and girls to communicate.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because one of my favorite listeners of the podcast, readers of the newsletter, and just all around great guy, Jamie Rice, that runs Babson's D3 program. So you've probably played him once or twice.
Yep, played against him. Yep,
Yeah,
great coach.
yeah. He literally doesn't know what his team does for warmups. I asked him once on the podcast; he had no idea. So it was quite interesting to see how he viewed it. He's like, game days players, like it's all them. It's on them. They've got to figure it out. If I'm talking too much, all I'm adding is more confusion, and they need more clarity and collaboration. So practice, that's my time. I'll help coach. We'll do smaller games. We'll ask questions. We'll think through things. We'll make corrections, yada, yada, yada. But game day, that's for the players. Is that similar to
Yeah.
your experience?
Yeah, I mean that's interesting point, and like I said, he's a great coach and been there many years and has a great program where, I'm sure, and I know, I mean, I was again a little bit of a chatty guy, but there comes a point where I'm sure players they've had enough of their coach talking, whether it's throughout the week and at practice, maybe you just get a little tired of that, but on the ice playing, it's just the players, the coaches aren't out there, so. I think it's good for a coach to kind of have that self-awareness, take a step back, understand what the team needs and doesn't need. If maybe they need a kick in the rear at some point later in the game, you can step in there, but your time as a coach is pretty much over when it comes to game time. It's then on the players and them making corrections. And if you need to kind of jump in further down the line in the game, you can, but they kind of got to take the onus on themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Eddie, I'll give you the floor for anything you want to talk about. No, I really appreciate you coming on here. Feel free to tell people what's going on in your life, or if you just want to say thanks, you can end it there. Floor is yours.
I was trying to think of something like a last question for you that, real, you know, I guess, thinker. But I guess the one, thing that I guess we can end on, and, like me, I'm sure you probably touched on this conversation, other podcasts, but, for, someone like myself who's, probably been out of the playing career, 5, 6 years now, maybe not quite an old timer coach, but, a little bit more than, my first couple years coaching is, I guess best advice going forward, for myself or any type of young coach with a little bit of experience, but trying to, really elevate themselves to, becoming the coach or an elite level coach.
I got 2 words: get curious. There's so much that we can never know, or we may know it, but we don't have the bandwidth for. But if you can have your players thinking, not overthinking, but thinking, that's great. I literally wrote a drill book called Drills, Awareness, and Questions. The last part being the most important is the question asking and allowing players to find their best solutions. So you're at the end of the day, you can't put the hockey stick in your hand anymore. They've got to do it. They've got to make the decision. So giving them the opportunity to think through and make these decisions beforehand, before they actually see the situation, that's massive. And then if something goes wrong, like instead of casting blame, get curious, ask why. Like maybe they didn't see a player, maybe X, Y, and Z happen and they made this read. So maybe the read's bad. Whatever it is, if you're getting curious, it's going to lead to further growth, further understanding, and you're just going to gain a much broader, richer point of view, thought process, etc. So don't be, I forget the exact quote from Coach Lasso and Ted Lasso, but it was don't be judgmental, get curious, and get curious. Sometimes curiosity comes easier to others, but get curious. That's always what I tell my young coaches. Like, don't tell, ask.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think there's a lot of coaches, out there that, they've been doing it a handful of years. So, they have all the drills and they kind of know, the basics and all that. But, there's still a little bit of time where they can kind of maybe improve themselves before they get into the old timer status of, hey, my way is the highway. And, that's it. So that's great. I'm for sure we'll take that piece of advice and, use it going forward and, get ready for spring hockey here coming up.
Hey man, the best hockey you'll ever play are the 3 years after you quit playing and you start coaching. That's when you realize how much of an idiot you were.
I hear you. I miss it. Even though I'm out of that 3-year stage now, I'm, getting to the old timers. But
yeah, you got old man strength now.
So
you're good, right?
Exactly. But
awesome.
I appreciate you having me on here. Anytime, I'd love to chat hockey. Hopefully, there's been some positive tidbits out of here listeners can take from, and anytime I'd be happy to chat goaltending or any type of hockey. So thanks for having me.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Ed.
Good deal.
That concludes this week's episode. Thanks for joining us here at Hockey IQ. If you haven't already, take a quick moment to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and drop a review. If you want to be a great teammate, even recommend us to a friend. You can follow us at Hockey's Arsenal on Twitter and Instagram. Check out the website, hockeysarsenal.com, where you can subscribe to the weekly newsletter. You won't regret it. Catch your buttes here next week for a brand new episode.